Welcome to the video and thanks for joining me for another week of training. If you're new here, really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. If you're a returning subscriber or viewer, appreciate you being here as well, and it's good to see you again. Today is Monday, so that calls for an easy run. We're gonna go out and do 3 miles at aerobic pace. For me, that's anywhere from 143 to 153 beats per minute. If you're new to running or you're just getting into heart rate zones, it's okay if your heart rate is either below or above that range at any given point. The real goal of this run is to make sure that we are having a certain aerobic capacity throughout the entire course of the run. Again, for me, that's between 143 and 153 beats per minute. If I can finish the run with my heart rate being somewhere in that range as my average, then it is a successful day. Let's go train. Three miles done, average pace 9:19, taking into account a little bit of slowing here and there, getting used to camera, everything being involved. So probably closer to 8:50, 8:40, and then average heart rate 143. Again, a little lower than normal, but overall, great run. I grew up playing sports, basketball, baseball, football, but I never ran for any reason outside of what was necessary for those sports. Up until about sophomore year of high school, I took a physical education class, which was swimming, and the girls' head cross-country coach was the teacher for that class, and he was also the assistant boys cross-country coach at the time. Now, I think probably every year he just had some individuals that seemed athletic and had some endurance kind of built in that he could see, and so he told me and a couple other guys that we should come and run cross country. Of course, at the time it's a no-cut sport. They had varsity and JV, and then I think there was maybe a freshman group or kind of a quote-unquote B team, but I joined that and instantly loved it, loved the people. It was such a different experience from team sports where, you know, while you are playing as a team, especially when you're younger, you're still kind of competing with one another, especially as you get into high school. There's people thinking about college and college sports and trying to get their particular stats up and get recognized, at least at the school I went to. I went to a relatively large 5A school in Colorado. Moving to a team that was more individual, it was surprising how team-oriented it was and how cool of an environment it was where everyone was cheering for each other, because at the end of the day, we were competing against ourselves. And while, of course, there is scoring and things as you get further up into the season, ultimately we are cheering for each other and we all want each other to do well so that that scoring is better. And that experience really brought me into the world of endurance. It is currently 6:51 at night, Tuesday. The workout today is 3 by 1600. Now that 1600 is supposed to be at or below race pace. For me, that's going to be anywhere from low 8s to high 7s. I'm not worried about hitting that perfectly, but that's kind of the goal that we're going for. In between each of those repeats, we're going to do 1600s as a cool down. Just let the heart rate come back so that the effort for the working set is at maximal, because we let that heart rate come down. Track seems solid right now. Did walk just from the car over. We'll see on the other turns how we're feeling. It is a little cold. It has been misting a little bit. We're gonna see how the track feels. Other than that, looking forward to the workout. Well, just did a warm-up lap, and turns out the only part of the track that isn't a complete sheet of ice is the 100 meters I walked from my car to the start of where I was doing my repeats. That means tonight is going to be an off night. Now, fortunately, the training program that I follow allows me to move my off day around. It's typically on Fridays, but some weeks life happens, weather happens. If I'd been on the track earlier today, maybe would have been a little bit better conditions. It did just get a lot colder in the last couple hours, and then it started misting pretty heavily. I think a lot of the icing that we're seeing is just from that change from earlier today. Tracks are also sensitive in that way, where as soon as they get a little bit of water on them, they're fairly slippery. Not a big issue. Gonna go home and do a core workout, which I need to do anyway, and then call it a day from there. Honestly, that's the great part about having a flexible workout program. If you look up Hal Hingden's advanced half marathon training, that's the training program I'm doing right now. You can read through how he explains why there's flexibility, and really is something that I appreciate because I can move my track days, I can move my long days, be flexible with life rather than trying to force things in. Could technically maybe go do a 3-miler right now, just change one of the runs, but it's later in the night, want to go home, want to eat. The weather's supposed to be better the rest of the week, so we'll just pick back up tomorrow. Just to give you all an idea of how icy it currently is, you can see these darker patches are the icy kind of mist layer, and then you have these dry patches here that are still a little slick, but they're not terrible. This was kind of the majority of the track of me walking up onto it, but then if I go over onto the track here, and this is the last kind of 200 going towards where I was finishing my repeats, it's literally a sheet of ice. I mean, there's literally ice stuck here. It is just before 6 in the morning, and we got 3 easy miles. Run complete, 3 miles in the bank. Really nice day out. It's always nice getting up early and just being done with it, honestly. And every time I get up and run in the morning again after not doing it, I realize why I like it so much, especially in the winter, ironically. Even though it's cold on both ends of the day. So you might as well get up and get it done early. And then sometimes you get cool sunrises, sometimes the light's bouncing off the clouds. That's always enjoyable, always beautiful out. It is time to do some strength work. For this block, and particularly the last 6 weeks of this block, this has been a 12-week training program. I decided to start incorporating some strength work back into the program, specifically core and legs. And to do that, I have been following Sally McRae's 6-week challenge on Playbook. Now, I am still using the running from the program I'm working on, but I'm using her app for the actual strength training portion of the training block. So far, it's been very helpful, and I'm doing this for a couple reasons. One, for speed. I feel like as far as training goes on the aerobic side and the muscular side, I've really kind of maxed out where I can go just training and running. Now, I know there's different opinions on this, but the second reason is that ultimately through the rest of the winter and into the spring, I want to build up to potentially run some ultras next summer and fall. One of them being a 12-hour event and the other being a 30 or 50 mile, depending on how that training goes. And that really has me motivated to build muscle and strength, because I know that those particular types of races are not necessarily about who shows up the lightest, but those that have the musculature to endure and to push the furthest. Continuing to work on that and really try to build. This is a leg workout today. I am starting very, very easy. They do have variations for weights, but because I'm still getting back into training legs as a muscle group outside of running, I want to make sure that the running still prioritized, so I'm not adding any weights at this time. I'm just doing body weight work as I get back into it. Since then, I had done some running kind of off and on later high school and really kind of fell off it completely into most of early college. Got a lot more into weightlifting. That whole craze was happening in 16 through 18. That was all of YouTube. Then endurance came back onto the scene. I really got back into it through watching a lot of ultra running videos, watching a lot of Billy Yang documentaries about ultra running. Over the pandemic, like most people, I didn't have a lot to do besides work and sit at home, and I knew I needed to do something different. So I started to train for what would become a marathon. That training, I kind of took very limited information from what I remembered in high school and just executed a plan that I found. That training went into the fall of that year, and I ran a self-supported virtual marathon, which was quite an experience for your first marathon. Carried all my own hydration, fuel, just went out, found a course, and did it around downtown Denver. It was a great experience as far as learning that I could push myself, that I could go that far. It was honestly kind of cool to do it without the crowd effect, because it made me really appreciate the crowd effect with races and as I continued to race later on in my life.
Good morning. Just pulled up to the gym. It is 5:45 in the morning, and I am going to do a tempo run. For this workout, that is 20 minutes easy, 20 minutes build, and then 10 minutes easy. Doing the treadmill again today. It's cold, it's wet, so wanting to avoid as much ice as possible. This is just the realities of training in winter in Colorado. It's gonna end up being more treadmill work than I thought, than you probably think, but we're embracing it for what it is. We're gonna go get this workout done and start the day off right. Tempo run this morning went great. Ended up hitting those exact time marks, being 20 minutes easy, 20-minute build, and then 10 minutes easy. The 20-minute build went from around 8:54 a mile down to 7:54 a mile, so fairly progressive. Just went up every 5 minutes, about 0.2 miles an hour, which was great. I also feel like I'm doing much better at just working on the treadmill. It's starting to feel a little bit more natural, kind of get into the rhythm a little bit easier. You know, I think the first time that you get back on the treadmill after a while, it just feels clunky, especially coming from running outside. But now I definitely feel like I'm getting back in the groove with how to pace myself, get my cadence in line, and really just lock in while I'm running on the treadmill. I'm going to be finishing off the day with some mobility. Mobility is something that I'm fairly new to. I have done it kind of off and on throughout my time running, and definitely didn't do any of it during my marathon prep, and my muscles were constantly sore and a wreck. This is the first kind of training block and period of training where I've strung a lot of different blocks back to back, so I am having a lot more stiffness around the joints, just kind of overall stiffness. That's really been a driver for working on mobility and just trying to create more flexibility in the joints. Also helping that by building muscle around those joints and doing that kind of work, but really just taking the time to stretch and do exercises that increase that mobility have been super beneficial so far. Back at the track today, trying to get that workout in that we weren't able to on Tuesday. Track is completely dry, so it seems like everything's going to be perfect for this workout. Again, it's going to be 3 by 1600 with 1600 to 800 float, depending on the time I have towards the end. Those floats might get a little shorter. Not the highest volume work today, but should be good quality. Always really appreciate doing track work, just working through flats, but also not being on a treadmill and being able to work on that drive, work on just turning over at a faster speed. Biggest thing for me in track work that I've been working on is not leaning in the turns. I'm fairly new to doing track, and that's just human nature. When you see a curve, you lean into it. You're used to it when you're driving, so your body kind of naturally does that. So staying upright through the turns in each lap has been helpful, and I've noticed that it does definitely improve your speed throughout the entire loop. The 1600s today are going to be race pace, so low 8s, high 7s, and then we'll kind of probably progress progressively push it as we move through the sets. Workout is done. Sun's coming up. It's a nice morning. Actually got to sleep in a little bit and run when it was light out rather than in the pitch dark. Always enjoy track days because you get to have layers on, and then as you do a lap you can take one off. That's rare in the winter. It's always nice to do track work on colder days. Also nice to run in the sun when you can take advantage of it. Overall, I think I was a little short on going negative across the splits. The last lap, I think I did a little bit slower than the second lap. I think the second lap was the fastest. Overall though, solid work and a nice way to start the weekend. Now from that point, I took a lot of time off of running again, and that training honestly wasn't as good as it could be. I was trying to do a lot of heavy lifting. I wasn't doing any mobility. I was eating really poorly, so my body was constantly tired, constantly tight, constantly sore. That discouraged me a lot from pushing forward and led to a lot of time off. I did the cycle again where I got way into weightlifting and then decided to train again for another marathon. That one was a little bit better. My training was a little bit smarter. I was not lifting at all during that training, which I think honestly I could have benefited from at least a little bit of strength training, but it just wasn't the training that I was doing at that time and kept me from probably getting as fast as I wanted to. The goal for that marathon was to try to go under 4 hours. My first marathon ever, I ran at a 4:47, and the second marathon I ended up at 4:08 in one of the most downhill marathons in the country, the Colorado Marathon. And so that was slightly disappointing. At that point, I then took another long break before coming back to running again. I went into strength training and really focused on building up muscle and regrouping. Another piece of that marathon training that I had a hard time with was, again, eating. Was not eating enough. So I lost a lot of muscle, was having a lot of fatigue and a lot of issues that come with overtraining and under eating. Going into just focusing on strength and eating as much as I could and just working out and eating and working out helped me gain a lot of muscle and really helped me get to the training that I am now doing, which is much more successful than any other training I've done before. Now this training block started for a couple reasons. I moved down to Denver from Fort Collins by myself. Sarah was still up in Fort Collins. My job brought me down here, and I was down here with a lot of free time and decided I needed to fill up as much of that free time as I possibly could. Now, what that started being was I was gonna do weight training in the morning and cardio in the evenings, and initially that cardio was not running. It was gonna be cycling or rowing or Stairmaster, anything but running. Just kind of had a bad taste in my mouth from the last couple marathon builds and just didn't want to feel physically unwell, but also didn't want to put the effort in at that time. So I built up a pretty decent cardiovascular base unintentionally. By the time I got to the spring of 2023, so this year, I decided to race at the Vail Mountain Games. I had about 8 weeks to get into running condition, so I just picked a 5K training program, and I did the Hal Hingden 5K, and I've continued to use his programs, which I think are great. When I did that, I pretty much just went straight into running training. Now, fortunately, I had built up that cardiovascular base, and I was super surprised how well I was able to transition into running because now I had all that strength that I had built up. Now it was a little harder at the beginning than when I'd run in the past because as I was lifting and eating a bunch leading into that, I'd put on probably 20-25 extra pounds. So I had to be very consistent about reminding myself that it's not all about pace. It's just about hitting heart rate zones and doing the work that you can, and the pace will come. So I did that 8 weeks
of training. Did the Vail Mountain Games. I originally was just going to do the 5K, but they had the 10K the next day, and I had so much fun in the 5K that I signed up for the 10K the next day, which was a lot. But it was super enjoyable and really gave me a new passion and perspective for running overall, and really led me to want to continue to train and to push myself further. After those, I decided to continue training for 5K and 10K and see where I could get myself. So trained, did a 10K block, got my speed further up. The reason that I wanted to try and train for 5Ks and 10Ks after the Vail Mountain Games is there's a lot of vertical in those. So it's hard to really judge how well your training went, because you know, you could have the shape to run a low 20 5K, but at Vail, you're probably going to run a 27-28. It really kind of gave me an incentive to go and see how well I could actually do on a flat course. Now, I did another 8-week 5K block and then preceded that with a 10K block. There was races throughout that, and ended up racing several races and increasing my PR in both the 10K and 5K. Now, my ultimate 5K PR was back in high school, and it was low 20s, so still trying to get there. But right now, my PR is just over 22 minutes in the 5K and 47 and some change in the 10K. Had a great time racing in late fall and just really enjoying getting in fall mileage. This was the first year that I was really committed to training through the winter, as you're seeing now, and I'd never done that before. It's incredibly intimidating. I don't love treadmill work. I don't love the cold, but I had been really into snowboarding the last several years, and I decided if I can go out and be in the cold while I'm snowboarding, I can go out and be in the cold and do workouts and do what I need to. I just have to learn how to dress for running. So after I got over that, started this half marathon prep, which you are all taking a part of right now and watching. It has been a great experience. It's been night and day over half marathon and marathon training that I've done in the past for a couple reasons. A, I've been very good at working in strength and mobility where I can, but not overdoing it, not doing too much strength work, especially on my legs early on in training, not overworking that muscular system. Additionally, I've really given myself a lot of grace in building up on those blocks. Instead of going straight from 0 to marathon training, I did a 5K, I did a 10K, now I'm doing a half marathon to help me train through the winter. After this training block, which now I'm incorporating more strength, I want to go and do a 50K training block, and I think I'm set up very well to do that, and I'm excited to go and do that once I complete this half marathon training. The other piece of that has been eating. I've done much better at being consistent in eating. I still haven't been the best at eating an incredibly consistent amount of calories, but as far as getting in meals every day and at least eating enough to generally fuel my workouts and being conscientious of those in culmination with work and other things that I have to fuel for has been much, much greater. So I'm very excited moving forward, moving through the rest of this half marathon block, and then ultimately going and seeing what I can do in the spring with 50K training. Thank you for watching this video. Really appreciate you taking the time. If you're not already subscribed and you enjoyed this video, please go and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Also, if you did enjoy it, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps the channel, it helps me to reach other folks like you that might enjoy the content. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you on Monday.